Have you ever walked into a normal workday and walked out without a future? Have you ever sat in your car after hearing unexpected news and realized that the life you carefully built no longer exists? At 42, I thought I was safe. Not rich, not powerful, but stable. I had worked at the same company for 17 years. 17 years of early mornings, late emails, missed family dinners, and quiet sacrifices no one ever saw. I believed loyalty mattered. I believed consistency would protect me. I believed that if I worked hard enough, I would never have to start over. I was wrong. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes to erase 17 years. My manager didn't look me in the eyes when he said the word restructuring. He said it gently, almost kindly. The company was changing direction. Technology was evolving. And they needed younger energy. They needed new skills. They needed something that was not me. I nodded as if I understood. Inside, my thoughts were loud and wild. How will I pay the mortgage? What will I tell my wife? Who hires someone at 42? Am I already too old? When I stepped outside the building, the world looked the same. Cars passed, people laughed. The coffee shop across the street was full. How strange that everything continues when your world stops. I sat in my car for a long time. I didn't start the engine. I just stared at the steering wheel and felt something heavy pressing on my chest. It wasn't only fear, it was identity. For nearly 2 decades, when someone asked me, "Who are you?" I answered with my job title. Now, I didn't know who I was. At 42, you are not young enough to feel adventurous and not old enough to retire quietly. You are in the middle, with responsibilities, with bills, with children who still need you to look strong. That night, I told my wife. I expected panic. Instead, she was quiet. She held my hand and asked one question. "Do you think this might be a beginning?" I almost laughed. A beginning? It felt like an ending. But her question stayed with me. For the first week, I did nothing brave. I updated my resume. I sent applications to companies that looked exactly like the one that had just replaced me. I tried to go backward into safety. No one replied. Or they replied politely, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." Other candidates, younger candidates, cheaper candidates, more current candidates. Each rejection felt personal, even when I told myself it was just business. One afternoon, while cleaning my desk at home, I found an old notebook. Inside were sketches, ideas, small business concepts I once dreamed about in my early 30s, before promotions, before responsibilities multiplied, before fear became practical. I used to want to build something of my own, a small consulting service helping local businesses adapt to digital tools. Back then, I didn't have enough experience. Now I had experience, but I didn't have confidence. Isn't that strange? When we are young, we have courage, but no skills. When we are older, we have skills but no courage. I sat at the kitchen table late at night reading those old pages. My handwriting looked younger, more hopeful, less careful. I realized something uncomfortable. For years, I had been slowly shrinking to fit inside a company. I stopped learning new tools because my role didn't require them. I stopped taking risks because stability felt responsible. I stopped asking what I truly wanted. Losing my job did not destroy my life. It revealed how small I had allowed it to become. That realization was painful, but also freeing. The next morning, instead of sending more resumes, I opened my laptop and searched for online courses. The screen felt intimidating. new platforms, new systems, young instructors speaking fast. I felt old, slow, outdated. For a moment, I almost closed the computer. Then I asked myself a quiet question. If not now, when? If I am already starting over, why start small? Why try to rebuild the same life that just rejected me? So I enrolled in a digital marketing certification course. My hands trembled slightly when I paid the fee. It felt irresponsible. We needed stability. We needed income, not experiments. But something inside me whispered that this was not an experiment. It was preparation. The first week was hard. I didn't understand the terminology. I paused videos again and again. I felt embarrassed even though no one could see me. Sometimes my teenage son walked past and glanced at my screen. I imagined him thinking, Dad is behind. Maybe I was, but I kept going. Every day I studied for 2 hours. In the morning, before the house woke up. Slowly, concepts began to make sense. Algorithms, analytics, automation tools. The world had not left me behind. I had simply stopped walking with it. There is a difference. One night, after finishing a lesson, I felt something I had not felt in years. Curiosity, not obligation, not pressure. Curiosity. What else could I learn? What else could I build? What if losing my job was not humiliation but permission? Permission to redefine success. For years, success meant a steady salary. Now, success began to mean growth, internal growth, skill growth, courage growth. I was still afraid. Let me be honest. Reinvention at 42 is not romantic. It is uncomfortable. It is humbling. It forces you to admit you are no longer an expert. You are a beginner again. But there is something powerful about being a beginner. Beginners are awake. They notice details. They ask questions. They improve quickly. Experts often stop trying. As the weeks passed, I completed my course. Then I completed another. And I reached out to 3 small local businesses and offered free consultations in exchange for testimonials. 2 ignored me. 1 replied. It was a small bakery owned by a couple in their 50s. Their online presence was almost invisible. I spent hours reviewing their website, their social media, their customer reviews. I prepared carefully. When I walked into their shop for the first meeting, I felt nervous. Not because I lacked knowledge, but because I feared being seen as someone who had failed. What if they asked about my previous job? What if they sensed my insecurity? The meeting lasted 1 hour. This time, an hour felt meaningful. They listened. They asked questions. They took notes. At the end, the owner said something simple. You explain things clearly. We finally understand what we've been missing. I walked out of that bakery with no salary, no contract yet, but something far more important. Validation, not from a corporation, from real people. That night, I told my wife about the meeting. She smiled, not because we were financially safe, we were not, but because she could see I was alive again. Losing my job at 42 did not instantly transform me. It did not remove fear. It did not guarantee success, but it forced me to ask a question I had avoided for years. If stability disappears, who are you without it? I am still discovering the answer, and maybe reinventing your life is not about becoming someone new. Maybe it is about returning to the version of yourself who once believed more was possible. At 42, I did not start again because I was brave. I started again because I had no choice. And sometimes, no choice is the greatest gift, because it removes the comfort of staying small and invites you to grow. The first invoice I ever sent was for $300. I stared at the number for a long time before clicking send. $300. After 17 years of receiving a fixed monthly salary, this small amount felt fragile, uncertain, almost imaginary. What if they refused to pay? What if they changed their mind? What if I made a mistake and they realized I was not as capable as they believed? Reinvention sounds inspiring when you say it slowly. But in real life, it is filled with quiet doubts that visit you late at night. The bakery owners agreed to work with me for a 3-month trial, not a long contract, not a big commitment, just a test. And I understood. At 42, I was not the only one taking a risk. They were trusting someone who had just lost his job, someone rebuilding confidence one step at a time. The first week, I worked harder than I had worked in years, not because someone demanded it, but because it mattered. When you work for a company, you protect your position. When you work for yourself, you protect your name. I redesigned their website homepage. I simplified their menu. I set up an online ordering system. I created a small social media campaign focused on local families. Nothing revolutionary, nothing dramatic, just clear steps done with attention. Every morning, I checked their website traffic. At first, and the numbers barely moved. 12 visitors, 18 visitors, 23 visitors. It felt slow, painfully slow. In my old corporate job, everything was large scale. Big numbers, big reports, big presentations. Now, I celebrated when 5 new people clicked a link. Reinvention shrinks your ego before it grows your skill. 2 weeks later, the bakery owner called me. His voice sounded different, lighter. "We had our busiest Saturday in 6 months," he said. I did not respond immediately. I closed my eyes, not because I was emotional, but because I needed a second to let the words sink in. Busiest Saturday in 6 months. He continued speaking about online orders, about new customers who said they found them through social media. After the call ended, I sat in silence. For the first time since losing my job, I felt useful. Not employed. Useful. There is a difference. Employment can disappear. Usefulness is something you carry, but success, even small success, brings new fear. What if this is luck? What if I cannot repeat it? What if the next client is disappointed? Growth does not remove insecurity. It simply moves it to a higher level. At home, life was still tight. We reduced expenses, canceled subscriptions, delayed a vacation. My wife returned to part-time work. I felt guilty, even though she never complained. One evening, while washing dishes together, I apologized. "I'm sorry you have to carry more because of me." She turned off the water and looked at me carefully. "You are not a burden," she said. "You are building something." Building something. Those words mattered. Because during reinvention, you often feel like you are destroying stability, but maybe you are simply replacing it with a stronger foundation. The second month brought new challenges. The bakery asked if I could manage paid advertising. I had studied it, I understood the theory. But real money creates real pressure. I hesitated. Old fear returned. What if I waste their budget? What if I fail publicly? Then I remembered something from my first online course. Progress does not come from certainty. It comes from action despite uncertainty. So I said yes. I started small. Test campaigns, limited spending, careful tracking. I made mistakes. One ad performed poorly. Another reached the wrong audience. In the past, mistakes at work felt dangerous. Now mistakes felt educational because they were mine. I adjusted, refined, improved. By the end of the month, their revenue had increased by 20% compared to the previous quarter. 20%, not because I was a genius, but because I was focused, because I cared, because losing my job had removed my complacency. Around that time, an old colleague called me. He had heard about my layoff. His company was also restructuring. He sounded tired, worried. I don't know what I would do if they let me go, he admitted. A few months earlier, I would have said the same, but now my answer surprised even me. You would adapt, I said quietly. We all can. We just don't know it until we have to. After the call, I thought about that sentence. We just don't know it until we have to. For years, I believed security came from outside, from contracts, from titles, from company logos. Now I was learning that security might come from capability, from learning new skills, from staying curious, from refusing to let fear freeze you. By the third month, the bakery offered to extend our contract for a full year. A full year. When I read the message, I did not celebrate loudly. I did not shout. I simply sat down and breathed slowly. Steady income was returning, not identical to my old salary, not yet, but real, earned, built. That evening, my family ordered dinner from the bakery. We sat at the table eating bread I had helped promote. My son looked at me and said something simple. So, you're kind of a business owner now? Kind of. I smiled. Maybe not fully, but no longer unemployed, no longer defined by loss. Reinvention at 42 is not a dramatic transformation. It is a series of small, consistent decisions. To study when you feel behind, to try when you feel unqualified, to continue when results are slow. I still wake up sometimes with a sudden wave of doubt. The future is not guaranteed. Clients can leave, markets can change, but something inside me is different now. When I lost my job, I thought my experience had expired. Now I see that experience was never the problem. Comfort was. Comfort kept me in familiar patterns. Loss pushed me into growth. And growth, even when uncomfortable, creates momentum. At 42, I am not chasing the life I had before. I am building one that depends less on permission, one that grows because I grow. And maybe reinventing your life is not about proving you are still valuable. Maybe it is about discovering that you were always capable of more than you allowed yourself to believe. The journey is not finished. It may never be. But I no longer see 42 as an ending. I see it as the age when I finally understood that starting again is not failure. It is movement, and movement is life. By the fourth month, my mornings felt different. Not easier, not completely stable, but intentional. I no longer woke up with the heavy silence of someone waiting for bad news. Instead, I woke up with questions. What needs attention today? Which client needs clarity? What skills should I improve next? There is a quiet shift that happens when you stop looking for rescue and start building direction. The bakery was steady now, not perfect, not explosive growth, but steady. And steady is underrated. One afternoon, the owner invited me to sit down for coffee after reviewing monthly numbers. We're thinking about opening a second location next year, he said carefully. Second location. The words felt large. Expansion meant risk. Risk meant strategy. And strategy meant they were trusting me with more than marketing. They were trusting my judgment. Just months ago, I had questioned my own value. Now someone else was asking for my guidance. Life moves quietly when you are busy working. You don't notice the growth while it is happening. You only recognize it when someone reflects it back to you. But reinvention does not move in a straight line. In the fifth month, I lost a potential client, a larger one, a small retail chain that had shown interest in hiring me. We had 3 meetings. They seemed impressed. They asked detailed questions. I prepared carefully. When their final email arrived, it was short. We've decided to go with a more established agency. More established. The phrase returned me to an old fear. Not enough, not experienced enough, not proven enough, not safe enough. For one evening, I let disappointment sit beside me. I did not fight it. I did not pretend it didn't hurt. Because reinvention is not about becoming fearless. It is about learning not to quit when fear visits. That night, I walked alone around my neighborhood. The air was cool, streetlights reflected on quiet pavement. I thought about my old job, about the predictability, about the comfort of knowing exactly how much money would arrive on the last day of each month. There is a strange temptation to romanticize the past when the present feels uncertain. But then I remembered something clearly. In my last year at the company, I had stopped growing. I knew every process, every routine, every meeting script. I was efficient, but I was no longer expanding. Security without growth slowly becomes stagnation, and stagnation has its own cost. The next morning, instead of searching for reassurance, I reviewed my weaknesses. Where was I still inexperienced? Where did larger agencies outperform me? The answers were honest. They had stronger portfolios, more case studies, broader data. So I made a decision. If I wanted stability without returning to dependency, I needed depth. I began documenting everything, every strategy, every campaign result, every improvement percentage. Not for pride, for proof. I built case studies from the bakery project, clear numbers, a clear before and after comparisons, clear explanations. Reinvention requires humility, but it also requires evidence. As weeks passed, another small business contacted me, a family-owned hardware store that had struggled against larger competitors. Their voice on the phone sounded tired, almost defeated. "We don't understand online marketing," the owner admitted, "but we can't keep ignoring it." I understood that tone, the mixture of resistance and quiet desperation. During our first meeting, I did not speak like an expert. I spoke like someone who had also faced loss, because business reinvention and personal reinvention share the same emotion: uncertainty. I listened more than I talked. I asked about their customers, their loyal buyers, their history in the community, and slowly, a strategy formed. Not aggressive, not flashy, but aligned with who they were. Within 2 months, their online inquiries doubled. Foot traffic increased modestly, nothing dramatic, but enough to shift their mood. At the end of our third meeting, the owner shook my hand firmly. "You're not just selling services," he said. "You're helping us breathe again." Helping us breathe again. Those words stayed with me, because that was exactly what this new chapter had done for me. It had not made me rich. It had not removed all anxiety, but it allowed me to breathe, to feel possibility instead of pressure. At 42, I used to measure my worth by comparison. Who had a higher title? Who earned more? Who advanced faster? Now my measurements changed. Did I learn something new this month? Did I improve a client's situation? Did I act despite fear? Growth became internal before it became financial. At home, something subtle shifted too. My son began asking questions about marketing trends. My wife shared ideas about potential services I could offer. Conversations felt collaborative, not protective. When you are rebuilding, your family does not need perfection. They need direction. One evening, while reviewing financial records, I realized something unexpected. My income was approaching what I used to earn. Not exactly the same, but close. And it had happened without a corporate office, without a manager, without a title, just through learning, adapting, and showing up consistently. I leaned back in my chair and let the realization settle. Losing my job had not reduced my value, it had forced me to reposition it. There is a difference between being employed and being capable. Employment is permission, capability is ownership. For years, I had rented my skills to one organization. Now I was investing them into myself. That shift changed everything. But perhaps the most important change was internal. When I introduced myself to new people, I no longer hesitated. I did not mention my layoff story first. I did not explain what I used to be. I simply said, I help local businesses grow online. Clear, present tense, not defensive. Reinvention is complete not when your income recovers, but when your identity stabilizes in its new form. I still have moments of doubt, moments when markets fluctuate, moments when a campaign underperforms. But doubt no longer defines me. It informs me, it guides adjustments, it sharpens attention. At 42, I believed starting over meant returning to zero. And now I understand it meant starting from experience, from resilience, from lessons I would never have learned if I had stayed comfortable. Sometimes I think back to that 12-minute meeting, the quiet room, the word restructuring, the feeling of being replaced. And I realized something gently powerful. That moment did not end my stability. It ended my illusion of where stability comes from. Stability is not a building, not a company, not a salary. It is adaptability. It is curiosity. It is the willingness to remain a beginner even at 42. And as I continue building, client by client, lesson by lesson, I see more clearly now. Reinventing your life is not a single decision. It is a daily practice to learn, to adjust, to move. And as long as I keep moving, I'm no longer afraid of starting again. Because I know now that starting again is simply another word for growth. There is a quiet confidence that grows when you solve problems you once feared. It does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself. It simply appears one morning when you notice that you are no longer asking the same frightened questions. 6 months after losing my job, I stopped introducing myself as someone who had been laid off, not because I was hiding it, but because it was no longer the center of my story. The center had shifted. Work filled my days now. Client calls in the morning, strategy reviews in the afternoon, online courses at night, not because I was desperate, but because I had discovered something I ignored for years. Learning is lighter when it is chosen. In my old company, training sessions felt required. Now, an education felt strategic. I was not studying to impress a manager. I was studying to sharpen my own tools. One evening, while reviewing analytics for the hardware store, I noticed a small trend. Customers were searching for seasonal repair tips. Instead of pushing advertisements, I suggested we create simple instructional videos. Nothing polished, just practical. The owner hesitated. "We're not media people," he said. I smiled. "Neither was I replied. We filmed the first video in the store's back aisle. Basic lighting, a smartphone camera, clear explanations. Within weeks, the videos attracted steady attention. Not viral, not dramatic, but consistent. And consistency is what builds trust. Watching that store evolve reminded me of myself. We were both adapting, not trying to compete with giants, but learning to use what we already had in smarter ways. Reinvention does not require a completely new identity. Sometimes it requires a new application of old strengths. At 42, I did not become someone else. I became more deliberate, more attentive, more responsible for my own direction. But growth also exposes new edges of fear. As my client list expanded from 1 to 3 and then to 5, a new question appeared. Can I handle more? In my corporate life, responsibility was distributed. Teams shared pressure. Now, if a campaign failed, it was personal. If a client left, it affected my household directly. There were evenings when I sat at my desk long after everyone slept, reviewing numbers again and again. Not because they demanded it, but because I feared missing something. Fear changes shape as you grow. It does not disappear. It evolves. One Saturday morning, my son knocked on my office door. "Are you working again?" he asked. His tone was not accusing, just curious. I looked at the clock, and I had been at my desk for 4 hours without noticing. That moment forced me to pause. Why did I want reinvention? Was it only income, only pride, or was it also freedom? If I rebuilt my career but lost balance, had I truly reinvented anything? That afternoon, I closed my laptop earlier than usual. We went for a walk as a family, nothing extraordinary, just sunlight, conversation, breathing space. Reinvention must include the life around the work. Otherwise, or it becomes another version of the same trap. The following week, I adjusted my schedule, clear work hours, clear stop times, focused blocks instead of endless checking. Something surprising happened. My productivity improved. When you respect boundaries, your mind rests. And rested thinking creates better strategy than anxious overworking. Around this time, a former manager from my old company sent me a message. The restructuring had not solved their problems. More layoffs were coming. He asked if I would consider returning in a consulting role. A year ago, I would have felt honored. 6 months ago, I might have felt rescued. Now I felt calm. I read the message twice, not with anger, not with bitterness, just clarity. Returning would offer predictable income, familiar systems, less uncertainty, but it would also return me to dependence on decisions I could not control. I thanked him politely and declined. The choice surprised me because for so long, I believed security meant being chosen by a company. Now security meant choosing myself. That shift was the real transformation, not revenue, not clients, not skills, ownership. When you own your direction, even small progress feels meaningful. I still plan carefully, I still save conservatively. Reinvention is not recklessness, it is intentional adjustment. At 42, I do not chase speed. I value sustainability. Each new client is evaluated slowly. Each new opportunity is measured against balance, because success without peace is simply noise. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to the man sitting in his car after losing his job. He felt erased, uncertain, small. If I could sit beside him now, I would not promise easy results. I would not promise quick income. I would say something simpler. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience. Experience does not disappear with a contract. Skill does not vanish with a title. Capability does not depend on an office badge. It depends on your willingness to keep learning. The world changes quickly. Technology shifts. Industries evolve. But adaptability is timeless, and adaptability can be strengthened at any age. At 42, I used to think reinvention belonged to younger people. Now I understand it belongs to anyone willing to release what is comfortable for what is possible. My journey is still unfolding. There are months ahead I cannot predict. Markets may tighten, clients may change, new competitors may appear, but I no longer measure stability by permanence. I measure it by preparedness, by skill growth, by mindset, by the quiet confidence that I can adjust again if necessary. Because once you start over and survive it, you carry a new kind of strength, not loud, not aggressive, but steady. And steady is enough. 9 months after I lost my job, I returned to the same street where my old office building stood. Not because I had a meeting, not because I missed it, but because I wanted to see how it felt. The building looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had grown. People moved in and out of the glass doors, some walking quickly, some staring at their phones, some carrying coffee like I once did every morning. For a moment, I tried to imagine my old routine, the elevator ride, the familiar desk, the predictable meetings. It no longer felt like home. It felt like a chapter that had served its purpose. And that realization was peaceful. Losing my job had once felt like rejection. Now it felt like redirection. Not dramatic, not magical, just necessary. Reinvention does not mean you erase your past. It means you integrate it differently. Everything I learned during those 17 years still matters. Communication, patience, understanding systems, managing expectations. But now those skills work for me, not just for an organization. Over the past months, my small consulting work has grown into something stable, not massive, not famous, but steady. 3 long-term clients, 2 project-based collaborations, a waiting list for next quarter. And I no longer panic when I check my bank account. I no longer refresh my email hoping for rescue. I wake up knowing that my income is connected to my effort and my adaptability. That connection changes how you see yourself. At 42, I once believed my value decreased with age. Now I see that clarity increases with age if you are willing to learn. I do not try to compete with 25-year-olds on speed. I compete on perspective, on discipline, on emotional steadiness. When clients face setbacks, I do not react impulsively. I analyze, adjust, reassure. Age is not a disadvantage when you stop apologizing for it. One evening recently, my wife and I sat quietly after dinner. No urgent bills on the table, no emergency discussions, just calm conversation. She asked me a simple question. If you could go back to that day and keep your old job, would you? I did not answer immediately. I imagined the version of myself who never lost it, still employed, still comfortable, still slowly shrinking. And I realized something gently powerful. Number one, I would not go back, because losing that job forced me to confront a truth I had avoided. I was capable of more than routine, more than stability, more than safety. Sometimes the life we protect is smaller than the life we are meant to build. Reinvention at 42 did not make me fearless. It made me honest. Honest about what I wanted, honest about what I had neglected, honest about how much I had relied on external validation. There are still uncertain days. There are still clients who hesitate. There are still moments when I question decisions. But uncertainty no longer paralyzes me. It informs me. It sharpens my thinking. It reminds me to stay adaptable. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson hidden inside loss. Security is not permanence. It is flexibility. It is skill, It is mindset. If you are listening to this and you are in your 40s or 50s or even 60s and you feel stuck or outdated or replaced, let me tell you something slowly. You are not behind. You may simply be at the edge of reinvention. Starting again is not a sign that you failed. It is a sign that you are still moving, and movement is life. The day I lost my job, I thought my story was closing. Now I understand it was expanding, not because the world changed, but because I did. At 42, I started again not with certainty, but with willingness. Willingness to learn, willingness to feel uncomfortable, willingness to release the illusion that stability lives outside of me. And in that willingness, I found something stronger than a job. I found direction. If this story gave you a little courage, a little calm, or even just a quiet reminder that growth has no age limit, take a moment today to ask yourself one question. Where have I stopped growing because I am afraid? You do not need a dramatic change. You do not need to destroy your life. Sometimes reinvention begins with a single course, a single conversation, a single small step. And if you are walking through uncertainty right now, know this gently. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you would like to hear more slow stories about growth, resilience, and building a life that feels intentional, stay with this channel. Keep learning, keep moving, and remember, it is never too late to begin again.